Who do you learn from? For young people, it's often teachers, parents, older young people, or sports or club leaders or instructors. There's lots of people involved in teaching and raising children and young people. For adults, our learning circle is perhaps smaller. We look to family members or friends, perhaps even our children. Maybe a few specific people that we admire or look up to and trust to give us guidance. Our learning often has to be self-propelled. And in today's story, Elisha is the student of Elijah, learning from him how to be a prophet, how to share God's messages with the people, and how to be bold and stand firm in faith, even when there is so much and so many against him. But also the other prophets and the people of Israel themselves look to Elijah as the one who points them to God and instructs them in how to live God's way. And after Elijah is taken, it says that Elisha picked up Elijah's cloak and went back to the Jordan River. And there he did the same miracle that Elijah had just done, and the river water parted before him. The prophets watching knew then that the same power that was in Elijah was now in Elisha. But they weren't quick to let their leader go. And in verses 15 to 18 of 2 Kings chapter 2, we read these words. The company of the prophets from Jericho who were watching said, "The spirit of Elijah is resting on Elisha." And they went to meet him and bowed down to the ground before him. "Look," they said, "we, your servants, have 50 able men. Let them go and look for your master. Perhaps the Spirit of the Lord has picked him up and set him down on some mountain or in some valley." "No," Elisha replied, "do not send them." But they persisted until he was too embarrassed to refuse. So he said, "Send them." And they sent 50 men who searched for 3 days, but did not find Elijah. When they returned to Elisha, who was staying in Jericho, he said to them, "Didn't I tell you not to go?" The prophets were dependent on Elijah. They didn't recognize that God was really their teacher and Elijah was just a man that God spoke through. Elijah was not afraid to leave this world. He didn't ask God if he could stay a little bit longer, if he could teach Elisha a few more things or visit a few more people before he left earth. Elijah knew that the work he was doing was ultimately God's work, and God was not going to let it fall. He wouldn't just let his people stumble simply because Elijah's time on earth was up. Elijah and Elisha knew that their job was to point to God, not themselves. And they knew that when they left the earth, someone else would take on their work. Because God uses people to be involved in his work on earth. Some people he uses as ministers or Sunday school leaders, but he also uses every single person to help spread the good news. And this work isn't ours, it's God's. And it's not for our own fame, but for his glory. And you are part of God's church. Whether you're 2 or 92 or older or younger or anywhere in between, you are part of God's church. You might not be a church leader. You might not think you're important, but God has chosen you. And maybe that seems crazy to you, that God would pick someone like you. But throughout the Bible, we see God choosing unexpected people to be part of his team, part of his family. He chooses fishermen and shepherds. He chooses foreigners and sinners. He used people that were far from perfect. And he chooses to use you and me. And he wants us. Does it excite you that you get to be part of God's mission? How prepared are you for that task? We can always trust God to provide the right people for the task, and that might be us. even if we feel unqualified or unworthy. Moses didn't think that he could lead God's people, but God helped him to speak. Peter thought that he had let Jesus down when he betrayed him, but he was the one that started the church. David stood in front of a giant and was unafraid because he knew that God was on his side and would help him to win. Joseph, Daniel, Esther, Mary, Stephen, all of them knew that they were powerless without God, and so they turned to him for strength. God doesn't need us to do his work, but he chooses to invite us to be a part of it. And if we get it wrong or make mistakes, which we will almost certainly do, God doesn't condemn us or kick us out. He forgives us, and he continues to love us and gives us more opportunities to serve him and show others who he is and what he's like. After Jesus rose from the dead, he told his disciples to carry on the work that he had begun and promised that he would be with them to help them. God sent the gift of the Holy Spirit to live inside all of those who follow him, to help them, to give them courage, to help them know how to live God's way. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 3 verse 16, it says, "Surely you know that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit lives in you." Even while we can't be together physically, even when we have to socially distance from one another, God's gift of the Holy Spirit means that he is with us no matter where we are and can help us to reach out to one another. So who can you reach out to this week with a message of love or hope or kindness or generosity that comes from an overflow of God's love and blessings to you?